Hello everyone and welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Kellen with Apex Archery and I am very excited because today we have perhaps one of the most exotic bows we've had on test all year. Do you ever find yourself getting bored of only options that are made out of aluminum or carbon? Maybe you're looking for something a little bit more strange. Well, this is the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery with a very long magnite riser. Can't wait to put it to the test. Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Kellen with Apex Archery and today we are reviewing the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery. Really excited as this is likely to be one of the more unique and exotic bows that we're going to have in for testing this entire year. This is a 33-inch axle-to-axle model with a 6.5-inch brace height. Xpedition Archery is saying that the tolerances in terms of what they're going to allow coming out of the factory for that ATA and brace height measurement will be within plus or minus 0.0625 inches of what they are advertising. Interestingly, I couldn't immediately find any published data on proposed system weight for this bow or for either IBO or ATA speeds. So we'll have to actually kind of quantify some of those things for you here before we can arrive at kind of a final determination there. That said, this platform is going to support draw lengths from 26 out to 31 inches, and it comes to you with an MSRP of $1,999. Before we go any further, let me pause to give thank you to a couple of different organizations with whom this show could not be possible. The first is actually Xpedition Archery. They were kind enough upon my outreach to actually loan us one of their bows for a couple of weeks so that I could do some shooting performance and actually put out one of these reviews for you all. The other is my friends over at Bear Creek Archery in Inglewood, Colorado. Happens to be my home shop, and they are also kind enough to be loaning us a lot of the different equipment that we're actually putting through the ringer and putting through the test so far this year. If you have any archery needs and you're in Colorado or traveling through, please go see my friends over at Bear Creek Archery. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin measuring the actual technical specifications at static for this bow. I cannot wait to get through all of that and actually get this thing outside for some shooting performance testing. First, let's look into that actual axle-to-axle measurement. Remember, we are looking for exactly 33 inches out of the factory. And if I go from the center of what appears to be a very substantial, probably quarter-inch axle, to the same on the other side, I am coming up with exactly 33 inches. So a really, really good measurement from them there. Next, let's actually check into that brace height. So going from the center of the string to the deepest part of this very interesting kind of grip profile, I am coming up that they are just a little bit long, maybe 1/8 of an inch long. So getting pretty close to that 6.5-inch brace height number that they are advertising, maybe a little bit closer to like 6 9/16 as official. Next, let's look into the actual riser dimension. This appears to have a relatively long riser, and remember, that's something that I definitely prefer. All things being equal, I want a longer riser relative to the axle-to-axle because I think of the riser itself as almost my vertical orientation stabilizer, forcing a lot of the mass of the system out away from my hands when I am on target and at full draw. So if I measure to the very top of this metal supporting limb pocket, finding kind of the pivot point for that bow, which is how we're measuring all of them this year, I do get that this is coming in at exactly 32 3/4 of an inch. So a nice long riser in this platform, giving us a riser to axle ratio of 99.2%. So really near the top range for bows that we've seen so far this year in the hunting lineups. Next, let's actually go ahead and check into the reflex design while we have that pivot point located. And remember, all things being equal, we would like to see a smaller reflex design, as less reflex means less impact of torque on the grip in terms of where your arrow actually lands on the shot. So again, measuring to the deepest part of the throat of the grip, I am coming up with exactly 2 inches. So maybe a touch longer than what would be absolutely optimal, but very much in keeping with averages that we're getting from most of the hunting bow platforms out for this year. Next, let's actually look into the weight of this system. Remember, they are manufacturing this riser out of a special and proprietary alloy called magnite, which I have heard some of their engineers confirm is some sort of a proprietary magnesium alloy. So this should be a relatively lightweight bow. So using our hand scale here, I am coming up with exactly 4.14 pounds. 4.14. I think that that may actually make this the lightest bow that we've had in for testing so far this year. Again, even though we are seeing one of the longer risers that we've seen, especially for a 33-inch axle-to-axle model. Last but not least, let's actually check into the limb width stance. Remember, a lot of manufacturers are moving and actually advertising to a wider limb stance, claiming that is going to increase leverage over the axle and ultimately stability when you are on target and at full draw. So using our calipers here, that is coming in nice and wide. It is 2 13/16 of an inch. So a nice wide limb stance. Again, very much in keeping with what we're seeing from a lot of the manufacturers so far this year. All right, I am very, very excited to actually put a rest on this bow. Meet me outside where I will give you my very first shooting impressions through the XLITE 33. All right, we are stepping out on the range now with the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery. So far, this is absolutely living up to its name. It does have that very long and imposing double bridge riser design, and it is very, very light in the hand. Really excited to get a couple of arrows to this guy, let you know my very first shooting impressions for that Xpedition. Relatively smooth draw cycle. Reminds me a lot actually of another manufacturer we've already had on test this year. Quite a bit of felt vibration in the riser on the shot. In fact, it resonates in that riser for about 3 seconds, despite the fact that we do have these little doinker vibration dampeners. As a caveat, and as is always the case, when we do get this lower stabilizer that can also serve as a vibration dampener, we do remove it. One of those does come with the Xpedition, which you may need to clean up some of that vibration. And again, a lot of that vibration is going to fall out once you do build it up with your rest, your scope, your sight, your stabilizers, and other accessories. Relatively smooth and linear, a little bit more aggressive than some of the other bows we've had on test this year. Very solid back wall feeling. But yeah, about 3 seconds worth of vibration felt on the actual shot itself. And to my ear, and I'll really kind of look for it this time, the actual shot volume itself seems pretty pronounced, especially compared to some of the other bows that we've had in so far this year. Nice grip. Decent string angle as well. And again, just that vibration on the shot. Yeah, all things considered, very interesting shooting performance coming out of the XLITE 33. Let's take this inside now, put it on the draw board and through the dyno. I'm very curious to take a look at the draw force curve for this bow. All right, we are back inside now with the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery. And now the bow is in our draw board and put into the full draw position. I'd like to take a moment now to measure some of the various dynamic specifications of the bow. How has that changed from the static specs that we got earlier? And what does that actually tell us about some of the shooting performance that we're getting outside? The first thing that I want to look into is the actual string-to-string measurement. That is, from the last point that this cam is really kind of supporting the string before going straight to the same on the other side, what is that measurement at full draw? And when I do measure there, I am coming up with about 33 and 3/8 of an inch for that string-to-string measurement at full draw. Next, let's actually take a look at the axle-to-axle measurement and see how much limb deflection we're getting out of what appears to be a fairly aggressive past or beyond vertical design in those limbs at full draw. So measuring our updated axle-to-axle measurement, I am getting 29 5/8 of an inch. That means that we are getting 3 3/8 of an inch of total deflection in these fairly parallel limbs out of the XLITE 33. Next, let's go ahead and actually go to the back of the bow and check out the string angle. Remember, all things being equal, I would prefer to have a more generous or slack string angle, specifically because, especially as a taller archer, I want to keep a very vertical head and neck position when I'm at my anchor and at full draw, and having that slacker or larger string angle is going to help me more easily find reference points on my face. So if I do measure kind of through the center of the arrow, through the knocking point, and then find center of string, I am coming up with about 36.9 degrees. 36.9 degrees. So an okay string angle measurement considering a 33-inch axle-to-axle bow. Next, I do want to take a look at the actual draw length. Remember, a lot of manufacturers this year coming in just a little bit long on the actual draw length, hoping to increase the speed out of the bow when you're testing it in the shop perhaps. However, the folks over at Xpedition are fairly honest. I would say that this is coming in almost exactly at that 30-inch mark. If anything, it's just a whisker long, maybe like a 16th, but it's so close that I'm going to go ahead and say that this is exactly 30 inches. Last but not least, and as is always the case, we did have a chance to actually run this bow through our dyno and generate a draw force curve. As we can see, a very interesting kind of shape or profile to the draw cycle for this particular bow. First, let's talk about the total energy required from the archer and ultimately stored in this platform on that draw, and that is 1,218.9 inch-pounds, or again, that accumulated force through the entire draw cycle for this particular bow. Now let's add in our hash marks for the 25, 50, 75, and 100% of the actual draw cycle particular to the XLITE 33. As we can see, what makes this so unique is we do get this very kind of early peak where we get almost right to our absolute peak weight around that 25% mark before dropping off by just a couple of pounds and maintaining that weight, gradually reapproaching that peak weight nearer kind of the last quarter of the actual draw cycle before it eventually kind of falls off and ultimately arrives home at a holding weight of 14.2 pounds, giving this in stock configuration a let off of 79.8%. So coming in almost exactly at that 80% let-off mark that a lot of the manufacturers are advertising. That said, again, kind of like looking at that double peak almost in the actual draw cycle itself, we were a little bit skeptical that perhaps there was something wrong with our measurement method or our actual equipment. So we did hand check this and then also checked it through on the dyno 2 different times. We got the exact same measurements and profile every single time, so we are very, very confident in those measurements. Ultimately, though, I am very curious to see how does all of that dynamic specification and that stored energy actually translate into speeds out of this platform. Let me grab my 350, 400, and 450 grain arrows. Meet me back outside where we will get our official speeds for the XLITE 33. All right, stepping back out on the range now with the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery and ready now for some speed testing. As is always the case, we do go ahead and double check and verify. This guy is pulling exactly 70.05 pounds, so coming in right at that 70-pound mark for that ATA spec, and it is set to the 30-inch position. This first arrow is match weighted to exactly 350 grains, so representative of that ATA spec. Let's see what kind of speeds we get. That first arrow going 322.3 feet per second. Next up is our 400 grain arrow. That going 299.1 feet per second. And last but not least is our 450 grain arrow. So again, getting more representative of what we would expect people to see using in the field for a hunting application. That arrow going 286.6 feet per second. All things considered, pretty good speeds coming out of the XLITE 33. All right, so we are back inside now after getting our speed performance out of the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery for 2024. As is always the case, we did want to go ahead and grab several different 350 grain arrows. We shot over the chronograph a total of 7 times across 2 different days and got a fairly tight average of 320.3 feet per second. So that is the official speed rating that we are going to give this bow for this year. Again, when set to that 30-inch draw position with 80% let off and very close to that exact 70 pounds of draw weight. That speed is coming to us from the new XB1 cam system from Xpedition Archery. This is a binary cam system, and all of the adjustment is made to the actual draw length itself, as well as via mod for the actual draw force curve and getting all of the efficiency out of the bow, using, again, kind of a dual mod system. So there are 2 different mods that do come with the bow that make it available for different parts of the draw length range adjustment. And then by adjusting these pegs here, which serve as your draw stops, making contact with the split yokes in your cables and ultimately delivering that very firm back wall feel that we did find during the shooting performance. All of that is then mounted to these fairly parallel limbs, which comes to contact and comes to rest with that Magnite riser, which is really kind of the hallmark of Xpedition's lineup this year. Magnite is a relatively secretive kind of proprietary alloy that is said to be used in aerospace and defense, but Xpedition Archery actually has the exclusive ability to use this particular alloy blend for archery applications. What's fascinating is they are advertising that this should be 30% lighter than 6 series aluminum, which, to be honest, we did find. Despite this having a very long riser length relative to that axle-to-axle measurement, this is coming in as one of, if not the lightest bow that we've had on test so far this year. They're also saying that that Magnite is actually stronger than traditional kind of professional grade carbon, with more vibration dampening inherent to the actual alloy itself than either carbon or traditional aluminum alloys. That said, we did find a little bit of residual vibration in this riser, but that might be expected, again, considering how light the overall system is itself. Before we actually leave the Magnite riser construction itself, I want to speculate a little bit because I don't really have any way to measure this very objectively, but it strikes me based on shooting this outside in some cooler temps that the Magnite alloy actually has more thermal conductivity than traditional aluminums that I'm used to shooting in most bows. The reason I say that is I actually had this outside to do some of our shooting performance testing, and I also had my aluminum bow set outside as well so that I could shoot some arrows and some ends when I was all warmed up. Immediately when comparing those 2 bows in hand back to back, the actual grip of the Magnite riser felt much colder to the touch in the exact same temperature, having been outside for the exact same amount of time. So I do wonder if this actually has a little bit more thermal capacity, or thermal conductivity rather, than traditional aluminum alloys. Again, I don't have any way to objectively measure it. It's just something that I definitely noticed, and I actually kind of tried to replicate a few more times just to make sure that I wasn't kind of completely coming out of left field. It does feel again to me like the Magnite is cooler to the touch in the same temperature than traditional alloys. But again, that could be cleaned up very easily if you're going to be hunting in colder temperatures by utilizing a glove or otherwise using some sort of grip tape, something like that on the riser itself. Otherwise, in terms of the overall kind of fit and finish of these bows, it really is top-notch. I hope it's coming through in the video, but you can see all of the intricate machine work in that double bridge riser design, and everything from the riser to the cams to the limb pockets can all be had in custom colorways and is Cerakoted, so it should be very, very durable. Moving into the actual riser itself, let's talk about the grip. I like the overall profile of that grip. The back is very flat, and it allows you to shoot with a very kind of relaxed hand position. It is more of that target style grip that I do prefer. And then the front grip angle is actually this interesting kind of elliptical shape that does allow for a nice relaxed finger position on the front there once you get used to it. So a really interesting take on grips from Xpedition Archery and something that I got along with reasonably well. Then, as is the case with most manufacturers, they are machining a little dovetail here into the back of their riser. And as I understand it, there may be some changes going into the new year where they are also compatible with the core system from Hamskea. So really nice to see an expansion of different integrate style rests that will interface to that bow coming from Xpedition Archery. Otherwise, moving up it, very traditional kind of two-hole side mount for your actual scope and sight. So nothing too interesting there. It would be really interesting to see if in future iterations, since this is just metal, if they began to play with Picatinny mounts off the front of that particular bow. Then they do have these interesting, what they call doinker dampeners. So kind of little metal weights affixed to this elastomer or rubber, said to help dissipate some of the vibration that, again, we did detect in this particular riser. And speaking of vibration, we did have a chance, as is always the case, to take this outside to do our sound testing or the shot volume. As is always the case, this was set to that ATA spec. We used a 400 grain arrow in an outdoor setting with our directional decibel meter set exactly 3 horizontal feet from the central shooting position of the actual bow itself. And we did get 85.2 decibels. One of the louder bows as far as shot volume that we've had on test so far this year, which I did pick up with my ear when I was putting the first couple of arrows through this actual bow. Ultimately, it's not an overly loud bow. I mean, it's probably getting to the louder end of the spectrum for hunting bows, but do I think it's going to be super noticeable to the individual shooter once you become accustomed to it? No, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. And we may expect some of that shot volume to reduce as, again, you do begin to load this up with your stabilizers, your quiver, your scope, your sight, and all of your other accessories. But regardless, we did get one of the louder bows that we've had on test so far this year. Otherwise, as far as other interesting features of the bow, they, like a lot of other manufacturers, are moving forward with the upper and lower stabilizer mounting positions. So if you do want to run that lower stabilizer position, or perhaps run this with the little kind of vibration dampening stabilizer that does come with the bow, that is an option for you. It may also be compatible with some aftermarket limb leg options from some other manufacturers. And then I would say one of the last really cool kind of selling features of this very premium bow is the actual string and cable set that does come with it. These are ABB Platinum Series strings. So a really, really nice string and cable set right out of the box that should provide a lot of longevity and really reduce the amount of kind of creep, peep, twist, and other issues that you can arise or come across when you do have a lower quality, maybe factory string set. So all in, that is our summary review of the XLITE 33 from Xpedition Archery. A very interesting and exotic bow from the folks over at Xpedition. Can't wait to see what they continue to innovate, again, under that new ownership that changed hands a couple of years ago. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing or giving us a like. You could also meet us over on Instagram. We are going to continue our quest looking at the very best longer axle-to-axle flagship hunting bows for 2024, and ultimately that's going to turn into a deep dive review of reviews where we collect all of this objective information and we actually deem what is the best bow for 2024 according to us here at Apex Archery. I hope you'll join us for that adventure. Otherwise, I hope to see you on the next one.